So in this session,
very delicate. Yeah, it's working, yeah. In this session, of course, we'll go back to the Shamatha practice. So, Shamatha practice is the practice of cultivating a calm, clear and focused mind. And today we're using the breath as the object for Shamatha practice. In particular, we're using the abdomen, focusing on the area of the abdomen. So yesterday we looked at the full body breath practice, which is particularly good for relaxation. The abdomen is particularly conducive to cultivating stability, attentional stability, particularly with counting or noting the breath. And one thing I'd like to mention before we begin the meditation is that in general in meditation it's recommended to have the eyes slightly open, allowing a little bit of light in. Because if you have the eyes closed, you probably drift into dullness. But here I think we can be a little bit flexible, and depending on what type of person we are. If we're the sort of person that easily gets very sleepy and dull, then if we have our eyes closed, when we meditate, we just drift into dullness. But if we're the sort of person that easily gets more agitated rather than dull, then having the eyes open may create more agitation. So then maybe you can have them lightly closed. So I think we can, as a beginner, just see what type of person we are, whether we tend to be more the sort of agitated sort of person or the dull type of person, and then adjust the eyes accordingly. In the practices that we're going to do later, observing the mind and resting in awareness, in those practices it's very much recommended to have the eyes open, and there are particular reasons for that in those practices, and we'll look at that later. So let's go back now to the Shamatha practice, observing the breath in the area of the abdomen. And again, if you find yourself getting distracted a lot, and you find counting or noting the breath helpful, then you can introduce that. Okay, so let's do the practice. And then after the practice, some opportunity to ask some questions about this practice. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Now narrow your focus and focus on the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Focusing on the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. Maintaining that ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And monitor that mindfulness with introspection, noticing if you're becoming dull or distracted, and then reapplying mindfulness appropriately. Does anyone have any questions about the shamatha practice in general, or in particular regarding this practice focusing at the abdomen?
In general, why don't we focus on the chest, only on the abdomen? Is there any special reason?
This abdomen practice is particularly good for stabilizing the attention, and also it is helpful for the relaxation because we're bringing our attention down. So the fact that we're focusing down is helping to bring the mind down as well. So the further up we put our attention, and we're going to see this tomorrow with the nostrils, the more we elevate the attention, the more there's a likelihood that we're going to get tense. So I think the abdomen is particularly good for, because it's again large area like the chest, but if you're bringing the attention down. So I think for that reason. And also, I mean, I guess you could focus in the area of the chest, but the thing is that sort of from a tantric perspective, this area here is it's a very powerful sort of place energetically. And if we're focusing sort of particularly here, and also here is another one, if we're focusing in these areas as the focal point of shamatha with tension for longer periods of time, we can really get very unbalanced. So this is a very powerful point to focus. I mean, in Tantra they actually do focus as one of the points here, but at that level then we don't have so much danger of getting very tight. But at our level, generally I wouldn't recommend sort of focusing here or sort of here as a point of focus for the shamatha practice, because if you do that again with tension for longer periods of time, you can really get very unbalanced and very, very agitated. Any other questions about, yeah?
Can you please explain what you mean by vigilance?
Vigilance, yeah.
Vigilance.
When at the beginning I say something like set your body in a state of relaxation, stillness, vigilance. Vigilance just means the back straight. Vigilant just means to be alert. So of course if you're like this, we're not very vigilant. You know, if you want to pay attention to something, then this, you know, we tend to do this when we want to pay attention. So, so with the back straight, less likely that we're going to fall in dullness. If we're sort of doing this, we're going to fall in dullness. And also at a more subtle level, you know, we have again from the sort of the Vajrayana or Tantra perspective, we can talk about all these subtle energies flowing in the body. And to have the back straight, they flow more easily. If you sort of bend over, they constrict those energies a little bit. But at our level, the main reason is just so that we don't fall into dullness. So that's vigilance, to keep the back straight.
About what we were talking before about the distractions.
About
the
distraction?
Distractions, yeah, that we have to release and refresh, and so sometimes I find it hard to find the motivation to stop thinking and be concentrated on the breathing, because I'm not often find myself just sit down and think. I guess I do it, but not consciously. So sometimes I sit down, I try to meditate, but I'm thinking so much, and I find it hard to find the reason to stop thinking and be concentrated on the breath.
Of course, we're not talking about trying to block thinking. If you're trying to block it, this is like fighting with it. It's aversion. It's just going. It's like throwing petrol on the fire. If you try and block thoughts, so we're not trying to block thoughts, but we are, of course, when they come up, we're just simply not paying attention to them. And of course the reality is that we have a very strong habit of thinking, too much in fact. I mean, sometimes in daily life, of course, we need to think to do things, but a lot of the thinking that goes on in our day is not necessary, and it's just habit, basically. It's habit, and often it comes. One is that by occupying our mind with lots of thinking, we can distract ourselves from maybe things that we should be attending to in our life. We just sort of go off daydreaming instead of attending to things we really need to. And of course, another reason that we get caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking is that, going back to these two types of happiness, is that we tend to be focusing on the first one. That's and of course that's coming from out there. So we tend to be, focusing outward in terms of our happiness, and then of course that temporal happiness or pleasure is conditioned happiness, and we don't really have a lot of control over the conditions around us, particularly